just give you a little bit of a forewarning here. There are going to be questions. I'm going to be asking some questions that we've already put together. But if you have a question that comes to mind that you would like to see asked, if you would just fill out that 3x5 card, and Donnie and Evelyn are going to be picking those up. So without further ado, let's move right into an invocation being offered by Mike Reed.
Yep.
Our eternal Heavenly Father, we are grateful to Thee for our many blessings. We recognize Thy hand in all things. We recognize Thy hand in the Constitution and those great chosen men who designed it. We're grateful for our heritage. We wish Thee to attend us this evening. We may consider our futures by obtaining information about those who will lead us. We ask Thee to bless those who will be speaking. We ask that our hearts will be touched by the Spirit and that we will know the truth of the things that will be talked about this evening. We say these things in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you, Mike. Please remain standing for the presentation of the colors by the color guard. Will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Don Petrie. Kirsten Millsap will lead us in the Star Spangled Banner.
Say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we aimed, and the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the bare road and skies
Both colors. Reset. Up. Order. Up. Hit. Wait. Forward. Up.
All right, well, we are very excited. Thank you so much for that, members of the Color Guard. Who here has served in the military or is currently serving in the military? Will you please stand so we can recognize you? Thank you. Thank you for your service. We are going to be passing around an email list. This email list is to really be advised on some of the activities that we're involved with, not only in the state of Arizona, but even throughout the country, some of the things that we're doing. I think I mentioned this just a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's worth repeating. We're heading out to Columbia University here in just about a month and a half. You think we're going to have some fun out there? That's going to be a riot, so we're very excited about that. We're going to be spending Constitution Week in New York City, Times Square. We're going to spend about a half a day out at Columbia University. We're very excited for that. And so you'll be able to not only hear about some of those activities, but what we're doing here locally as well, because we'd love to have you involved. We're creating a family, if you will, and that's what's going to be required to really move this message. Let's go ahead and hear from one of the candidates for Arizona governor. Let me just see by raise of hand, who here is undecided when it comes to who it is that they're going to vote for Arizona governor? Who's undecided? Okay. About a third, maybe a quarter to a third. Well, we're going to hear from Frank Briggs tonight. Really, these people, they've been traveling so much, involved in so many of these debates, they really need no introduction. But Frank Briggs served in the United States Congress out of California, representing California. He's also was a former police officer. And with that, he wants to be Arizona's next governor. Please welcome to the stage, Frank Briggs.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to be with you. Nice to be back with what I think is becoming my home away from home, Burke Basic School, as I get ready to start the new school year tomorrow, I understand. And it's really always good to be with Shane, who I refer to as really Arizona's #1 freedom fighter. It's nice to let that freedom just wash over us, right? And I'm telling you this, I'm running for governor of Arizona because I intend, working with the state legislature, working with my partners and colleagues in state government, to make sure that we have a rebirth of freedom and opportunity in Arizona that makes our state a model for the rest of the country. Thank you. And as I think about it, my life, my adult life, has really been dedicated to freedom, defending freedom, protecting freedom. I guess my selfish reason is for my children, and now my 3 grown adult children, all married, and now, as of 2 weeks ago, when we welcomed our 3rd grandchild into the world, my 3 grandchildren. But I have been about freedom and liberty. That's why, out of high school, I enlisted in the United States Army, and I'm proud of my military service. That's why, out of the Army, I became a police officer and a deputy sheriff. Went to college on the GI Bill, got my degree. Most importantly, met my wife to be in the back of the room. My wife of 34 years, Kathy, native daughter of Arizona, born in Tucson, Taft Way. And that 3rd grandchild that we had 2 weeks ago was a baby girl, Savannah Elizabeth Riggs, who now, like her paternal grandmother, is a native daughter of Arizona. And I defended freedom when I decided to run for the United States Congress in 1990 and was elected, defeating a Democrat incumbent in a congressional district where Democrats have almost a 20-point registration advantage. I went back to D.C. on the slogan of send a tough cop to Congress, organized the Gang of Seven to expose corruption in Congress, the House Bank and Post Office scandals, went on to serve 2 more terms as a United States Congressman, during which we cut federal government spending and taxes for the first time in our lifetime. When I left Congress after 3 terms to keep my term limits commitment, the federal budget was balanced and generated surpluses for 4 consecutive years thereafter. We have fundamentally reformed welfare by imposing time limits and work requirements on able-bodied welfare recipients. And I had compiled a consistently conservative voting record that earned me the highest ratings and endorsements of National Right to Life for my pro-life, pro-family voting record, and from the NRA for my voting record in defense of the Second Amendment and gun owners' rights. In my last term in the House, I chaired the House Education Subcommittee. Actually, Newt Gingrich, Speaker, came to me and said, I want you to chair the House Education Subcommittee. And my first reaction was, why me? What have I done wrong? But he said that because I had been a school board president, and that's how I cut my political teeth, he wanted me to oversee the process of trying to downsize and dismantle the U.S. Department of Education, which is blatantly unconstitutional. Now, we couldn't do that with Bill Clinton in the White House, and by the way, my last votes as a member of Congress were to impeach Clinton. But we were able to turn those federal education programs, not for a scandalous affair with a White House intern, but because he perjured himself in front of a grand jury. But we were able to convert those programs into block grants. And we made a lot of progress, which has since been essentially reversed as the federal government continues to expand its reach and its intrusion into the legitimate sovereign affairs of Arizona state government. They're doing this tweet the vote thing on, I think it's KTAR, it's FM station. I got a tweet today about how do you improve, again, on basically the eve of the school year starting, how do you improve public education in Arizona in 144 characters? A little bit like the debates and forums we've had. Tell us your solutions for fixing the state budget, getting our economy growing again, securing our border, protecting public safety, which, by the way, is the first and highest responsibility of state government, and for improving K-12 education. So I simply tweeted back, Arizona standards plus local control plus parental school choice and parental rights equals accountability in K-12 education. Hashtag repeal Common Core. And you have my word on that. It's a solemn oath. It's a solemn oath. When I give my word, I consider it to be an oath. A vow, like the most important vow I've taken in my life, my marital vow to Kathy. But also those oaths that I talked about. When I enlisted in the United States Army, when I first pinned on the badge and became a police officer and took an oath to protect and serve the public, and yes, the oath of office when I was sworn into Congress to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So you have my oath that we will repeal Common Core to restore local control and decision-making in K-12 education and take back our legitimate responsibility as Arizonans for how we educate our kids. We'll get it done. And in this room on Saturday night, I think there was some of you here were in attendance, and there were some people that questioned, well, Frank, how can you do that as governor? And I said very simply, I read from that 2.5-page memorandum of agreement, which in that agreement says these standards are intended to be voluntary. That memorandum of agreement is signed by Governor Brewers, whose authority expires the day she leaves office and who cannot bind her successor. So I will rescind her signature on that Common Core memorandum of agreement. I'll work with the state legislature to defund Common Core and save the $350 million plus. I think Diane thinks it may have a better number than I do as to the actual cost, but to save Arizona taxpayers the full cost to fully implement Common Core in Arizona. And I will demand, and I will expect the resignation of the members of the Arizona State Board of Education who voted to adopt Common Core. And on that last point, On that last point, some of my opponents challenged me. Well, Frank, you can't do that. After all, the State Board of Education was created by our state constitution. The members are appointed and confirmed for full terms. Well, of course I can. Do you think I'm asking the people of Arizona for a mandate? Send me to the governor's office and we will pull Common Core out by its roots. But I just want you to think about this. We have to hear this particular argument. Do you think that an incoming governor who has promised the people of Arizona that he'll get rid of Arizona, get rid of Common Core, not our president, who's promised the people of Arizona that he'll get rid of Common Core, do you think that governor shouldn't be entitled to demand the resignation of the members of the Board of Education who are unelected people? Every incoming governor has the right to appoint his team to staff out or fill out his administration. So I expect all gubernatorial appointees, as honorable men and women, to submit their resignations, just as happens at the federal level when there's a transition or change between presidential administrations, and I'll decide which ones I would like to ask to stay on in state government and be a part of my team. But it won't be those members of the State Board of Education who voted to adopt Common Core. And you have my word on that. And because Common Core is the theme of the night and one of the dominant issues in this election, and I predict to you, by the way, those Common Core moms are going to be heard from in this election. Call them barbarians if you like, but they're going to be heard from in this election.
That's right.
They're a powerful force across this state and across this country. So I'm just going to conclude with this, and that is, folks, don't be misled and don't settle in this election. I'm running against vanity candidates, self-funding, millionaire vanity candidates who've never held elective office, who've never had to cast a single tough vote. I cast over 3,000 votes as a member of Congress. My very first votes were on the first Persian Gulf War resolutions. My last votes, as I mentioned a moment ago, were on the articles of impeachment against Bill Clinton. Don't settle for someone with no legislative record, a blank slate, no record to back their rhetoric. Because we can do better, and we need a proven, determined, tested, trusted, vetted governor in that office, given the stakes and given the challenges that we face. So I've been in 50 side-by-side forums and debates. I was in Lake Havasu earlier today, got asked the question, well, where do your opponents come down on Common Core? The most telling one of all, here we are, all the candidates assembled at a conference table upstairs in the Arizona Republic for an interview with the Arizona Republic editorial board and a lot of the news reporters. And now they claim, of course, it wasn't being recorded, even though every reporter had out their recorder or smartphone recording it. But we were all asked point blank, what is your position on Common Core? I'm the only candidate that said, I will get rid of Common Core to restore local control and decision-making in K-12 education, to protect the rights of parents, to protect charter school autonomy, to protect homeschooling. The other candidates, I guess, since they can't produce the tape recording, you'll have to take my word on this, but they all straddle and waffle on that question. Why? Because they're still courting the Chamber of Commerce vote. The Chamber of Commerce, that along with the Bill Gates of the world, have foisted Common Core upon us in complete disregard for state sovereignty, the 10th Amendment, and the legitimate responsibility of Arizona state government, since it takes up 40% of your state tax dollars, for K-12 education. The other candidates straddle and waffle at it. You look at their supporters, and you look at Mr. Ducey's supporters in particular, the business community is panicked because he's sinking. He was their hand-picked candidate. He's the establishment candidate. He'll do their bidding, Mr. Bidwell. And the fact of the matter is, they have all, at some point or another in the course of this campaign, have tried to straddle on that particular issue. And folks, when it comes to first principles, like protecting local control in K-12 education, like protecting the rights of parents, there can be no equivocation. So I'm just going to conclude by saying, I didn't look out in the audience when Shane asked for a show of hands, but those of you who are undecided, I hope you'll really, at this point, obviously since we're into early voting by mail ballot, the primary election's coming right up, I hope you'll carefully evaluate the candidates. Think about the candidate who's truly proven, who's ready to do the job on day one. I'm going to turn 64 in September. I'm blessed with good health. I'm in great shape. Maybe some of you see my TV commercial, because I work at it. But I'm not going back into politics because I won. I've been out of politics 16 years, joking all the while I was a recovering politician. And I'm only doing this because I think the stakes are so great. I think we are in crisis as a country. I'd love to get Shane's opinion on this, but I think the crisis is on a huge magnitude, on a par with basically going back to our founding as a country, when Dr. Franklin walked out of the Constitutional Convention and Mrs. Powell approached and said, "Well, doctor, what have we got? A monarchy or a republic?" And he famously replied, "A republic if we can keep it." That challenge as to whether we can keep our republic is greater today than at any time in our country's history since the Civil War, given a president and a lawless administration. I'm going to push back hard on it. So I'll just close with this. I think it would be a good thing. I want to make our state, I will protect state rights, including beginning with K-12 education. I want to make our state less, not more dependent on the federal government, but it would be a good thing for Arizona's next governor to have successful experience as a United States congressman, as a reformer and leader in that body. Somebody who knows how to get things done back there, who does know how to push back against an intrusive, ever-expanding, overreaching federal government. And I will be that governor. We've got tough challenges, but I'm convinced that we can, as I said at the beginning, we can have a rebirth of freedom. We can restore confidence in our government, the idea of constitutionally limited government. We can restore hope and opportunity, especially with our young people, by making them see that their voices are heard, that elected officials are, in fact, responsive and accountable. So again, I hope you'll carefully study the candidates. I think I was supposed to make very quickly 2 announcements. One, I'm going to be right back in this room tomorrow with the Honorable Russell Pierce, former State Senator Pierce, author of SB 1070. Russell has endorsed my campaign, my candidacy, big supporter, and we're going to be talking about border issues and federal government overreach. And certainly Russell is an expert on that particular subject. And then there is going to be an event. Let's see, this is on August 16th. It is, I'm looking for the location here. It is the Moral Action Ministry meeting, Saturday, August 16th, 9:45 to 12 noon. It is at the North Scottsdale Christian Church, 28700 North Pima Road in Scottsdale. I'm sure there'll be more flyers around, and I'm going to be speaking at that event as well. I'm going to stay for the debate, which I'm sure will be lively. But I want you to know, in closing, that Diane Douglas has my strong support. The governor, to get rid of Common Core altogether, needs to have a partner in the state superintendent. And I look forward to working with Diane to get rid of Common Core, to restore local control and parental choice in K-12 education. So thank you for this opportunity to visit with you tonight. I appreciate it very much.
All right, thank you, Frank. We're ready for the debate. And I have to tell you, John Huppenthal, you don't have a tablecloth. And the reason why is because you are not a female. This was a last-minute request. And so I had to accommodate the request because your opponent is wearing a skirt. So it's only the right thing to do to accommodate that. We're very excited. We're very excited about having both of these individuals here tonight. They've both been on my radio program. We both had lively debates on that program. And I'm just thankful that they're willing to come out and have this conversation and really give us some direction about where they think we should go right now when we're talking about education. You know what, I have to say, when you look at the conservative movement and you look at the liberal movement, we have so many things wrong when it comes to moving this message. We so often focus on the next election, and the other side is focusing on the next generation. That's part of the problem in America right now, and that's why we need to have this debate tonight about where we're going with respect to our education with our young people, the opportunities that are there awaiting for us. And so with that, if I could just take a seat, I'm going to introduce the both of them. Diane Douglas, she sat on the governing board of the Peoria Unified School District from 2005 to 2012. She was the board president in the years of 2008 and 2009, and she wants to be your next superintendent of public instruction. Will you please welcome to the stage Diane Douglas. John Huppenthal, he's your current Arizona Superintendent of Public Instruction, and he's running for re-election. His political career includes serving as city councilman, state representative, and state senator, and he'd certainly like to remain your Superintendent of Public Instruction. Please welcome to the stage John Huppenthal. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the format of the debate. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. We're then going to move into 2 rounds of questions. The first round of questions will come from me. These are questions that we put together. And each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question. And then after each candidate has had an opportunity to answer that question, there'll then be another 2 minutes for rebuttal. And that rebuttal, can include interruption, so long as it's done respectfully, and bantering, cross-examination, really a discussion between the two of you. And then the second round of questions will come from the audience. And again, if you have questions as we move through, please fill out your 3x5 card. And Donnie, where are you?
Right here.
The old grumpy cowboy. And then Evelyn as well. Evelyn, where are you? Evelyn, I think she's probably out before here, but she'll be involved in making that happen. So let's move forward with opening statements, and we'll begin with Diane Douglas.
Can everybody hear me? Yes. Shane, thank you for having me here tonight. I appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. I'm Diane Douglas, and as you heard, I'm running for Superintendent of Public Instruction. My husband, daughter, and I, we moved here from what I fondly refer to as the People's Republic of New Jersey to raise and educate our daughter here because we knew we'd have a better life. As she went through school, I began studying our American education system to make sure that she would get the best education she possibly could, and because some things kind of made me go, they're doing what with our children? And I wanted to understand. As she went through school and when she ultimately graduated, I decided to run for our local school board, which was the Peoria Unified School System. You know, we have revamped and revised education multiple times in this nation, and we do it every 10 years or so. It's not going to change because the same people who have marginalized academic content, rewritten our history, or in many cases, quite frankly, just want to make a buck, are the same people who are doing it again and again and again. Our State Board of Education brought in the Common Core standards without telling us, without asking our permission, without finding out what we wanted for our children, because they're our children. We need to not believe these falsehoods that we're being told. Recently, the Chamber of Commerce released talking points for candidates so they would know how to deceive you because they think their vision for education is far more important than your vision for your children and your grandchildren's education. I'm Diane Douglas. I'm running for Superintendent of Public Instruction because I want to return control of education to Arizonans because parents know best what their children need. Thank you. God bless.
Mr. Huppenthal.
Well, first of all, Shane, thank you for setting up the debate tonight, and thank you for your dedication to the Constitution, which has spanned decades. You've done an incredible job across the entire state of telling all of our students what an incredible nation we live in, what an exceptional nation we live in. And I know that from my personal experience. I grew up on the south side of Tucson, 5 brothers and 5 sisters, and my strongest memory of childhood is hunger. Being hungry every single week. Shopping day was Wednesday, and we started running out of food along about Sunday. So I know the value of a dollar. My family, my dad and I refurbished a $40 car. We drove that car for 6 years. We know that there's still families out there that are stretching to make ends meet. And every year of my elected service, we've known and acted that dollars are precious and they needed to be absolutely conserved. As a young child, my mother took us to the library every single week. Before kindergarten, I was reading books on Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, and I was learning the history and the culture of this country. My fondest memories were of reading about Lewis and Clark heading out west and struggling and dragging those horses and boats up to that first mountain peak, and then looking out west and seeing 7 more mountain ranges. And it was that precise moment in reading that book that I understood what it was meant to be an American. They didn't head back to Missouri. They continued to head west, and they had to climb those 7 more ranges. That was an incredible feat. They accomplished the mission that President Jefferson had given them. And that's what these values are what I've enacted through my 20 years of elected service. I have an incredible record of accomplishment relative to decentralizing power, defeating the federal government. There are the best homeschool laws in the nation, according to our Homeschool Association, Arizona Families for Home Education. I was the deciding vote to bring charter schools to Arizona. And once I brought charter schools to Arizona, I took them from a 10-year contract to a 15-year contract. And then I said that they could replicate without going through all the bureaucracy. School choice is my venue. You know that I've bled for school choice. I've been battered politically to make school choice work. This is what I'm all about, decentralizing power and fighting the federal government. We'll talk more about this tonight. Thank you for being here and giving up your evening.
Diane, let's go first to you. What is the job of the superintendent of public instruction, and why are you the best person for the job?
The job of the superintendent, and I wish I could tell everybody here that it comes with a magic wand to just make the federal government get out of our education system and return it to our children. But basically, oops, I'm on leash here. The job of the superintendent is number 1, to superintend the schools of Arizona and to make sure that the schools of Arizona are doing the jobs that you want for your children and your grandchildren. Now, how is that accomplished? It's accomplished in part through your locally elected school boards. And right now where we have a problem is with an appointed board rather than an elected board. You only have one elected voice on that board. And right now they are letting everybody imaginable get between your locally elected representatives, the people that come from your neighborhoods, to decide how your schools are run, and the State Board of Education. We have Expect More Arizona, we have First Things First, we have the Chamber of Commerce, we have all of these people who have special interests and special reasons, money, for wanting to get in this fray and getting to decide these things. We need a leader in our State Department of Ed that will get these people out of the way and stop giving unelected people so much power over your children. You know, we have a system right now where our education system isn't asking what we expect for our children and what we want for our children. They're telling us what we must accept from them for our children. And in my opinion, that's what the decision you're going to make in this election. Are you going to let bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., or bureaucrats on Jefferson Street decide what's best for your children? Or are we going to take back control of our education system for our children to make sure they're educated to be free-thinking, free-governing Americans? Thank you.
The job, unfortunately, of the superintendent right now has become defeating Obama's liberal education agenda. That's become job 1. And nobody's been more effective across the nation than I have. We've had students crossing the border, illegal immigrants crossing the border, attending schools at taxpayer expense. I had to do major enforcement actions to put a halt to that. We returned over $1 million to taxpayers when those students were attending those schools at taxpayer expense. We put an end to it. When I came into office, I had the ethnic studies controversy. And I had to make sure that I won that battle. And I spent 6 months getting ready for that war. We went through all the lesson plans and organized them to present the evidence exhibits. I selected the expert witnesses that would testify in the trial. I selected the lawyer who would conduct that battle. Stage by stage, I got ready. 6 months. A lot of people were criticizing me. They wanted fast action. Well, when we were ready, we went in and mopped the deck with them. I defeated them in state court. I defeated them in federal court on appeal because I did such a good job in state court. And we're continuing to defeat them in that fight down there. So the border enforcement, the ethnic studies, and then there was the waiver. The waiver is a tough thing. You're negotiating with the entire apparatus of the federal government. We ended up with one of the best, if not the best waivers in the nation because of my knowledge of basic education research. We were able to keep them continuously on the defensive. We shoved back the entire Elementary and Secondary Education Act of the federal government and rid our schools of all that bureaucracy and paperwork. So we've done a great job of defeating the federal government and Obama's liberal education agenda. We're going to get in more to this Common Core controversy, much more complex than some of the simplistic speeches you've been hearing out on the campaign trail. Just as I got ready to fight the battle on ethnic studies and win that, I am now ready to fight the Common Core battle and win that. I've seen the lay of the land, I've laid it out, I've created a strategy, we're ready to win again. And I will compare my win-loss records when it comes to conservative victories with any elected official over the last 30 years. I am almost undefeated. Thank you.
Ms. Douglas, any rebuttal or cross-examination?
Yes, exactly. Well, I would like to refute the ethnic studies was actually not program, that was brought, a suit that was brought and basically dropped in Mr. Huppenthal's lap by his predecessor. Laws were passed to make sure those ethnic studies were stopped, and it stopped, and I would question why, when the suit was already, and why we had an attorney general who could have fought that suit, why a new attorney was hired at taxpayer expense. But talking about, and I understand that Tucson is back at it, and they're back at bilingual education also, but when you talk about No Child Left Behind waivers, you have to realize in order to get those waivers, we had to agree to accept Common Core. We had to agree to turn over the standards and the education of our children to the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. And as far as the waivers having much meaning, here is a letter that our Department of Education received, the Honorable John Huppenthal, on November 25th of 2013, that basically said, if we didn't have our, I believe it was our teacher evaluation in line, the way they wanted it, those waivers are gone. So that's how tenuous the waivers are, and that's how strong a grasp Washington wants to keep on our children and our education system.
You're entitled to your opinions, but you're not entitled to your facts. The fact of the case is, when I was in the legislature, I was chairman of the Education Committee. And the Ethnic Studies Law was put through my committee, I passed that through my committee, and it went into law. So I created the groundwork for that. And when I got into office, there was no case prepared. There was no evidentiary exhibits. There were no experts selected. We did all of that work, and it was meticulous, grinding work to get prepared for that battle. All of it. It was my team that prepared the exhibits, that organized the lesson plans, that selected the national experts that were going to come in to win that case. So the idea that case was gift wrapped for me is a complete fabrication. We had to do our due diligence. And people who have been familiar with me over time know the incredible depth that I go into in doing research on education research, basic research to be ready for battle, any kind of battle when it comes to public policy. I did 212 pieces of legislation as a legislator. That's an incredible workhorse. Do you know who was number 2 in Arizona history? 167. We cleaned out massive amounts of bureaucracy, massive amounts of regulation by working every single day, bringing experts together and saying, how can we make these laws better? That's my track record. Working, working, working. Not one press release in 18 years. Just work. Thank you.
Mr. Huppenthal, this question is to you. Do you agree with the Common Core standards that are found in the College and Career Ready standards? Second part of the question is this: is there any authority in the Constitution for the federal government to impose these educational standards on the states?
I have never supported the Common Core standards. I have blocked the Common Core science standards. They're known as next generation standards. Some people don't say that, well, that's not Common Core, they're next generation science standards, but they're coming out of the same groups that produced the math and English language arts standards. I went in there and analyzed those standards and said, the earth sciences standards, those aren't science standards, those are indoctrination standards, calling for our students to be indoctrinated into a theory that man causes climate change, causes global warming. I said, I will not accept that. I blocked it. Other states have just accepted those. So I blocked the science standards. I had blocked Common Core literature. They had books in there, The Bluest Eyes, Dreaming in Cuban, that were absolutely pornography. I stripped those out of our standards, any kind of recommended book list. I blocked Common Core literature. A lot of people have been bringing Sandra Stotsky into Arizona and advocating for her ideas. The Bluest Eyes is on her literature list. She brought that in as a mandatory book in Massachusetts. I don't find that acceptable. That book is horrendous. Horrendous. So we have blocked Common Core literature. And we are absolutely opposed to Common Core history. I have such reverence for this country that comes from my basic values. My mom taking me to the library and reading about the history of this book. I get down on my hands and knees and kiss the earth because of the opportunity that I've had to grow up in such a great country that was formed by our founding fathers. And very few people, policymakers, know the history of that period from 1776 on through to 1787, that period of time and all the work that was done by Alexander Hamilton and the others who developed the Constitution. I have absolute reverence for that. We are blocking all of these attempts, Howard Zinn, etc., who are out there trying to rewrite America's great history. I'm absolutely blocking Common Core history. We are now ready to go into hearings on the math and English language arts standards. And this is not an easy battle, folks. Somebody can get up and say up here bombastically, I support, I'm going to abolish Alma School Road on Monday. That's ridiculous. What are you going to do, erase it off the map? Send out trucks to rip up all the pavement? Our standards are big, monstrous things that have to be dealt with. I have laid out the battle plan. We're ready to deal with it. We know how to get rid of Common Core. Now, do I support phonics and English language phonics and to teach reading in kindergarten? You better believe it. There are some things in our standards right now that are beautiful conservative victories. I'm going to keep those, and we're going to get rid of the crap.
Mrs. Douglas?
I made some notes. I'm sorry. I'm just kind of thunderstruck, quite frankly. Mr. Huppenthal says that he doesn't support Common Core standards, but we have a long, over 3.5-year history of him being out, going around this state and telling people that these are the standards that we absolutely have to have for our children. Many argue that what bound us to the Common Core standards is the race to the top money. It's Mr. Huppenthal's signature that is on the third application that brought the money here to the state of Arizona. And we just got a tiny little bit of money, ladies and gentlemen. Let me put it in perspective for you. $25 million, half of it was kept for bureaucracy at our State Department of Education. So roughly $12.5 million went out to the school districts. We have over 1 million K-12 children, so our children were sold out for less than $12.50 per child. Oh, over 3 years, so maybe $4 a year per child, give or take a little bit. The Chamber of Commerce created a special award to recognize Mr. Huppenthal for his work in bringing Common Core, Arizona's college and career ready standards to Arizona because we had to change the name of them to try to fool people. I'm sorry, it's time that we bring some truth and integrity back to our superintendent of public instruction office and let people know what needs to be done for their children. And just really briefly, in the few seconds that I have left, Generation Next, the science standards, Arizona, last I checked, we are on their website as a participating state, even though our State Board of Ed has never adopted them. And I know from talking to teachers that they are using them in the classroom. So how out of control is our State Department of Education?
let's go through these one at a time. The Race to the Top grant. We did get a Race to the Top grant. My department used that Race to the Top grant for teacher training. $5 million a year. That's so infinitesimal that it's beyond belief. But we did a phenomenal job with teacher training. 86% of the teachers who came in, charter school teachers, district school teachers, rated the quality of our training as good or excellent. We distributed the other half of that funding out to the counties to provide local services to schools and school districts in their training. The feedback we got is that they did an excellent job too. The Race to the Top grant binds us to nothing. We are free right now to take any action we want with regard to our state standards. My concern is, and my concern has been steadily, is what is that action going to be? Is it going to be what Indiana did? I did refer to what Indiana did as the barbarians. They went out there, and everybody outside of Indiana thinks they got rid of Common Core. But when you talk to the experts, and I've talked to them, when you talk to Terrence Moore of Hillsdale College, everybody knows Hillsdale, incredible intellectual center for conservative thought. Terrence Moore thinks what they did was create a mess. They didn't get rid of Common Core at all. They just created a mess of their standards. You have a profound responsibility as superintendent of public instruction to guide this process in our schools through to a better place. What is that better place? We have these standards in place now, and some of them are good. Phonics, phonemic awareness, letter identification, teaching reading in kindergarten, that's a heck of a good standard. When somebody says, I'm going to tear Common Core out by its roots, are they talking about tearing Common Core out and replacing it with whole language? That would be ridiculous. I'm saying that what we would do would be thoughtful. We would keep the very best standards, and we would go through a series of evidentiary hearings, which Indiana did not do. We would go through a series of evidentiary hearings, maybe 8 sequentially, paced at 3 weeks apart, bringing evidence from many of the people I see in here. The Gaddies, who've done incredible work in education. We want them to come in and provide absolute evidence as to what we would do, where we're going to go with our college and career ready standards, so we can be confident that the very best standards for education for Arizona students. And this is what I do, this complex work. Been doing it for 20 years, been very successful at it. And I would put it up, and I would ask my opponent to say, what great accomplishments does she have? I have a huge semi-truck full of accomplishments. What confidence can we have over an alternative approach?
I'd like to answer Mr. Huppenthal's question. He asked, what is that better place? That better place, well, I'll tell you what that better place is not. It's not an education system that's controlled by the federal government where Washington, D.C. bureaucrats think they know better than we do what is best for our children. It is not a system that tells us how we must evaluate our teachers and compensate our teachers, how we must evaluate our schools, and it's certainly not a system that demands that we collect massive amount of data on our children to be shared with other states, for-profit companies, and the federal government. We can't change Common Core as long as we are in the Common Core system, because the standards are copyrighted. They don't belong to Arizona. Our standards were written by Arizonans. They were written by Arizona's teachers with input from Arizona parents. That did not happen with the Common Core standards. It was virtually done, I wouldn't say in the dead of night, but as if it were done in the dead of night, without public hearings, without public discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that for a fact because I was on the school board when that happened. We received a notice, oh, by the way, these might be put up for posting for people to observe this date, that date, maybe, maybe not. There were no public hearings. And to the point of our children, or excuse me, I'm sorry, our teachers. Under No Child Left Behind, and I don't agree with that federal program, I don't agree with any of the federal programs that have come down the pike because they're all unconstitutional and against federal law. But under No Child Left Behind, every single teacher had to become highly qualified in their content area, or in the case of Peoria, some that didn't want to go through that chose to leave and retire rather than go through all that recertification. Tell me, ladies and gentlemen, what has changed about arithmetic in eons that now teachers have to be retrained under Common Core standards? What has changed about the English language that we are spending millions and millions of dollars to retrain people who already know how to teach?
This next question, 60 seconds each. I'd like to follow up, Mr. Huppenthal, with the reference you made to the Race to the Top program. Correct me if I'm wrong, but to fully compete for Race to the Top money, states have to adopt standards common to multiple states, and only one set of standards fully meets that definition, and that's Common Core. Would you agree or disagree with that?
In order for states to have competed for the Race to the Top, they had to have college and career ready standards. And there were a number of states that said no to Common Core. And Arizona was one of 6 states in which we took advantage of the fact that they had customization for 15% of the standards. So as long as your standards were sufficient so that a student who achieved that standard could go on to some degree of success in college and career, you could pass. Texas adopted a college and career ready standards. A number of the states went down that path. We are under no obligation whatsoever, no copyright obligation, no statutory obligation, there is no obligation at all. We could take a new set of standards to our state board tomorrow, and they could adopt them, and there would be no penalties whatsoever, financial or whatever, to Arizona. The question is how do we determine what that place is going to be? I've already established we're not going down the science standards process, we're not going down the history standards process of any Common Core, and we are going to do a complete and thorough review of our math and English language arts standards so that we can make recommendations, and all of you, particularly those of you from the education establishment who are doing a great job educating our children, are comfortable with the standards that we adopt as a state.
Ms. Douglas?
Thank you. You're absolutely correct, Shane. The Race to the Top applications, we had to agree to adopt standards that were common to multiple states. The only standards that met that requirement were the Common Core standards, period. Here's a list of the states who applied for it. Some 47 originally submitted an application. You want to know the really sad part, ladies and gentlemen? Only 19 states were ever given any money for it. And if Mr. Huppenthal can go to the State Board of Ed tomorrow and have that process begun to change these standards, then I ask, why didn't he start doing that 3.5 years ago? Why don't we only doing it now?
Well, my opponent is the very best example of why you need to pick the time for when you conduct your fight. My opponent could have stopped Common Core, could have stopped Race to the Top right in her own school board. She couldn't put together 3 votes to do it. I have an undefeated record when I do my fights. I defeated the federal government over and over again. I defeated them on the waiver. We didn't have to make any concessions on teacher evaluation to get our waiver. That's my record winning. My opponent just lost her vote when she was against Common Core for her school district. She just lost her vote when it was Race to the Top. She can wax poetic out on the campaign trail, but I'm the one who delivers victories. My opponent is the one who delivers defeats. I intend to win. Thank you.
Ms. Douglas, would you like to respond?
I was the only school board member, to my knowledge, back in 2010 to make a motion to defeat Common Core. Clearly, that our district, the first time that it came before our board, we were not asked whether we wanted to vote on the Race to the Top application. The superintendent just came forward and decided to listen to the discussion of the board. That's what they do when they don't want to take a vote. And he heard from 3 very liberal board members that they were fine with taking money from the federal government. 2 of us were very vocally opposed to it. Unfortunately, when May of 2010 came around and we had an opportunity to vote on it, I was right there to make a motion to stop it, that we not participate in the Race to the Top application. Unfortunately, no, we had not had another election at that point in time. That's how you affect change at the local level in your school board. When those people are not doing what you want them to do, you need to get into their face and tell them either we will vote you out of office or we will run against you and get you out of office. But unfortunately, there was an election between 2009 and 2010.
Ms. Douglas, we're going to go back to you. 2 minutes each on this particular question. Ms. Douglas, some have claimed that you are a one-issue candidate, that is, you only focus on Common Core. How would you respond to that claim?
Oh, I love to respond to that claim. First of all, Common Core, as I already talked, the Race to the Top application, what we had to have covered in our state application were 4 things. How we would teach our children with Common Core standards and how we would test our children. How we will evaluate and compensate our teachers. How we will evaluate our schools, and a massive data collection system that is just beyond belief. What it will take to fulfill the requirements of that data collection, and all the testing is computerized. So that will also drive our education spending in this state. Our children, our teachers, our schools, the data on our children and our spending. Is that one issue? No, I think that's multiple issues. But the true one issue of this election is who controls our education system. Is it parents and grandparents and the taxpayers, or is it people that want to make a small fortune off the backs of our children? That's the one issue of this election, and I will do everything within my power to make sure control goes back to the parents and back to the people who should be controlling the education of our children.
There are literally hundreds of education issues, and we've been very successful over the last 3.5 years at pursuing the decentralization of power through what we do. Let me give you an example. Every year, 200,000 students, families, move from one school to another school. Our data system, unlike the balloon system and unlike those other systems, we give the parent ownership of their child's data. So that when their child moves from one school to another school, that school district, that door closes, they no longer own that data moves over to the next school, that teacher, those parents can go right into there and see every piece of data that the state has on them. This is a critically important sense, this data ownership by parents. We have participated in none of these consortiums of data sharing. We have none of these data issues that people have talked about in terms of gun ownership, party registration. None of that's on ours. We've gone out to the very best teachers in the state, and we've asked them, what information do you need to pursue excellence in your classroom? And well, that information is going to be available to every teacher with the touch of a button, and it's going to be available to every parent to inspect so that they know what's going on with their child's data, and there will be an immediate appeals route if they don't like the data that's in there. That's just one aspect. We have taken the computer system from 50% response availability for our schools to 100%. That took a massive effort. I had to bring in a CIO who was rated one of the top 100 in the nation, and we hugely reduced bureaucracy for our schools. We're now down to $300 per student, less administrative costs. In Arizona, that's $330 million of savings relative to other states in the nation. So that's just one aspect of what I've been able to accomplish with my skills as an administrator. My skills that have been developed over the last 30 years in situation after situation. We have the ongoing conflict down with the Tucson Unified School District. That is going to be a never-ending battle. I mentioned that I defeated them in state court. I defeated them in federal court. We're continuing to defeat them. We have to stay right on top of them. This is a never-ending battle with the federal government. You know you can have confidence in us because we've won these battles before and we're continuing to win them. Thank you.
Ms. Douglas, would you like a rebuttal?
Oh, sure. trying to trip over this cord here. Excuse me if I fall down on the front table. When I was young, quite a while ago, we moved between my 2nd grade year and my 3rd grade year. And I went to a new school in a town a couple of towns over. And you know, when we moved, my mom went to the school office of my old school and she picked up my file and we took it with us and we went to the new school and my data went right along with me. That's nothing new that's happening. But every piece of data, for the data of a child to truly belong to the parent, then there's no appeal process. There's no asking someone else if something that's objectionable can be taken out. It belongs to the parent and it can be removed. Period. End of story. That's what true ownership means, not some kind of illusion that we're going to allow you to believe that somehow this is your child's data. And talk about the data system. Our children were subjected to the Park testing as a pilot project this year, and our children's data was collected on it. And if parents even knew it, I doubt it. Were they given permission? I don't know. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but I'm sure they were not made privy to what data was collected. That went off to a for-profit consortium, and that's data we'll never see on our children. How does that belong to their parents?
There's going to be a new test. Ames is over. It's the past. We're never going to go back to the Ames standards. There's just no consensus all among educators at all and a desire to go back to Ames. So we're going to go on to some future set of standards. So the question is, how are we going to measure those standards? And one of the possibilities is the Park test. And what I had the ability to do, I sat on the board of Park. So my scientists were right in the rooms when they were developing those items. So we made absolutely sure that there were no climate change indoctrination questions on the Park test. We made absolutely sure that there was no defamation of the Founding Fathers included in those Park items. Through my position on that board, we were able to get a good, solid, conservative test developed. The other thing that I did is I moved that test from controlled by the federal government over into a nonprofit organization just like ACT, just like SAT. And I know we're going to have continuing fights there, but that test is now going to be completely under the control of the states, not the control of the federal government, through the board of directors that's going to be on it. It's going to be state people who are on the board. So this is what I was able to do from my being on the board of that organization. And this is a huge accomplishment. We had to stay right on our scientists, saying, okay, what is this development process doing? Watch out for these climate change questions. Watch out for all these issues on history. We want our Founding Fathers treated with respect. All these things, even though it's English language arts, they still are trying to slip these questions in. We have to constantly stay on the alert. So these are the things you can do when you have skills and when you have the abilities that I've accumulated over 30 years. We have a good record of accomplishment when it comes to defeating the federal government, defeating our intellectual opponents. And in Arizona, this school right here, Burke Basic School, the charter for this school right here was applied for and achieved under a law that I put in place. Now, my opponent's campaign manager has been out there on the internet criticizing my support for charter schools. Criticizing my support for charter schools. Criticizing my talking about the fact that we have the best homeschool laws in the nation. My opponent, we went through the records, she voted to allow the teachers union to take out union dues for political purposes without the written permission of the teachers. She was the only board member to do that. It's in the school board records.
That's a lie.
It is in the school board records. And so the question I have is, what is my opponent's true feelings about school choice? You know me, that I've bled for school choice over 20 years, bled for it. And the sacrifices I've had to make to achieve political victories and keep our school choice in place. We don't really know what my opponent's true position is on school choice.
Ms. Douglas, we'll give you 60 seconds.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I am my campaign manager, Mr. Huppenthal, so and I have not been out writing against that. But let me explain to you this accusation he made about I supported the union. The law changed, and it was no longer legal for school districts to force union dues out of a teacher's paycheck. Our administration came to us and said, you know what, we can be ready to stop that and be in compliance with the law by January 1st of, I forget what year it was, I believe it was 2012. I could be mistaken on that. Our board said, no, that's all right. We're going to change this policy, and we are going to allow them to continue taking dues out until May or June or the end of the school year or whatever it was. I was the only school board member that voted against it and said, no, we have a duty to be in compliance with the law as quickly as absolutely possible, and when our administration says it's January 1st, it needs to be January 1st. The record says that I said we would be taking too long to extend until May or June. That's what the record says.
Mr. Huppenthal, we're going to change gears here up a little bit. We'll begin with you on this question. You came out and made comments through anonymous blogging that degraded those on welfare, for example. Do you regret doing this?
If you wanted to find the place out on the internet where liberal Democrats go to get ideas, the center place, the place they most frequently go in Arizona. If you were a liberal Arizona Democrat and you were interested in meeting and talking with other liberal Arizona Democrats, my estimate is the place you would go would be Blog for Arizona. And so I developed a habit of going out to Blog for Arizona and keeping an eye on those liberals. And I punched away. I punched away with facts. Let me give you one of the facts that I posted out there. Let me give you a couple of them. I said, from 2006 to currently, we've gone from 50,000 automobiles being stolen a year to 18,000. Think about that. 50,000 to 18,000. That's 32,000 automobiles not stolen. That's not something you read in the liberal media. And I told them on that blog, the liberals there, that this was directly correlated with the enforcement actions that Russell Pierce and others were able to make against illegal immigration. That strongly looked like we were, by getting illegal immigration under control, that we were able to save the lives of 32,000 people. And let me give you another fact that I put out there. The murder rate in the city of Phoenix, it went from 240 down to 109 per year. That's 121 people not being murdered. 121 over that same time period. We went from DUI arrests that went down by half. And children, the fatality report at DHS, we went from 140 child deaths in Arizona down to less than 80. That's the equivalent of 3 Sandy Hook massacres. This was what was really happening with my blog posts. Facts, evidence. I kept them on the defensive time and time again. Piketty's book. Piketty is the new Marx. Everybody familiar with him? He's been on the Amazon bestseller list. Piketty says that France, since the Reagan Revolution, he says that France has grown just as much as the United States. Well, guess what? They haven't created one single hour of work for the working man in France since 1980. Piketty's statement is an absolute falsehood. Since 1980 in the United States, we've grown jobs 45%, and we've only lost 3% hours per work. That's what was going on those blog posts. I was beating the hell out of liberals.
And beating the heck out of people less fortunate sometimes, to call them things like lazy pigs. I want to return integrity to our State Department of Education. Under Mr. Huppenthal's guidance, when a teacher from Tucson, and I have his permission to tell this story and mention his name, Mr. Brad McQueen, he's written a book called Cult of Common Core. Anybody read it? Yes, a few of that. Probably one of the best books to explain what has happened. He opposed Common Core. He actually worked on the testing. He worked on some of the other things as a supplemental or, we give them stipends to work on different projects like that, teachers. Well, when he came out opposed to Common Core, he was blackballed by the Department of Education, and there are memos that go around that were published in the newspaper, the Arizona Daily Independent, that showed exactly the total lack of respect our Department of Education has for people who are not in line with the Common Core thinking. And disgracefully, one of the employees of our Department of Ed referred to this man, and please apologize, I apologize, as an F-tard. F-star C-K-T-A-R-D. Where that is the most disgraceful behavior I have ever seen. That should not be allowed. I can't believe that could happen, and I cannot abide the thought of that continuing in our Department of Ed. We should be an example for our children. We should set the example of how adults behave and how people should be relating to each other. And I'm sorry, this happens all too often in education, because once again, like I told you, they keep telling us what we must accept for our children rather than asking us what we expect for our children. And we need a system that has respect for the parents, the grandparents, and the taxpayers to whom it belongs.
Let's talk about the teacher who was a part of my team. And we respected him as a part of the team. But guess what? He created an enormous problem. We put him in there with an objective to review those items. We wanted conservatives in there. I'm a conservative. I love the fact that he was conservative in there. But guess what? He created a problem. They had an item in there that referred to our Native Americans as Indians. This was a fight that we didn't need to fight, but he fought it. He demanded that Native Americans be referred to as Indians. Native Americans find that enormously insulting. They do. They do. And but it is a fight that is off the main path of what we want to do, of what we were trying to achieve. It was a fight that I didn't want to have happen. It created a lot of disturbance in the whole range. Plus, he was on a specific committee in terms of how he was doing item review. He was crossing off of that committee onto another committee. So ladies and gentlemen, part of what we do, we all can get in these kind of disagreements. Let me tell you, I know. I've been in enough fights in my career that I wish I had avoided. But it created quite a few problems. So I have absolute respect for him. I have absolute respect for his values. And I've gone across this state and talked to thousands of people who are opposed to Common Core. And I'm listening to them. I'm listening to them. I've got to lead us out of this thing. I've got to find where we're going to go, which is a better place. Our standards are a huge, monstrous thing. It's like a mountain that you're going to have to reshape and reform. There's an enormous amount of work to be done. I need to know exactly how to do it to have the best possible outcome. And that's what I've been doing, shaping these ideas. The same way we got ready for the ethnic studies battle. I wanted to be absolutely confident that when I walked into that courtroom, that I would mop the deck with my opponents. I didn't want there to be a single chance that I could lose that battle because there was so much at stake. When I went down to the Tucson School District, they had a poster of Che Guevara up on the wall. I was ready for that fight because of my parents. I said, how can you have him on the wall? He shot 14,000 Cubans in the back of the head for no other reason than their speech rights. Intolerable. They were declaring Benjamin Franklin a racist. He's a huge civics rights hero when you think of all the work he did on slavery. These are battles we can't afford to lose, ladies and gentlemen, and I get ready for them with incredible depth and seriousness. Thank you.
Ms. Douglas, this question is for you. We're going to move into some of the questions that have been submitted by the audience. We're going to move through as many as possible here, and we'll give each candidate 2 minutes each. First question, Ms. Douglas. Have you raised money for pro-abortion candidates or for candidates who support amnesty for illegal aliens? In addition, there's also an accusation that's been made that you supported Democrats and individuals that supported Common Core. Will you address those allegations?
Yes, I will gladly address those allegations. I have not raised any money for Democrats. I have not raised money for pro-abortion candidates. I have not given money to pro-abortion candidates, nor would I. when I was running for the city of Glendale, I was running for the Glendale City Council at the time. Obviously, we lived in Glendale, and it was a passion of mine because of how that city was so poorly being run. It was on the verge of bankruptcy. One of the issues that I campaigned on very clearly was that that Glendale needed to stop fighting the Tohono O'odham casino. And I was very, we were losing money. We lost lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, and the nation had come to the school board. We sat down and talked with them. I met many of the leaders of the nation. During that campaign, I was invited to a nonpartisan event to discuss my views and share them, because I believe that Glendale did have to stop that lawsuit. The taxpayers were now paying for the Tohono O'odham's legal fees. So I went to that lawsuit. I did not advocate, or I went to that event. I did not advocate for anyone to give any money to any Democrat candidate. I did not give any money to any Democrat candidate. The only thing that we shared in common was a belief that Glendale had to get back on the right track and had to stop wasting taxpayer money on an issue that was taking them down the wrong course.
Mr. Huppenthal?
What's out there, and it's out there in evidence, Manuel Cruz, a pro-abortion, endorsed by Planned Parenthood, a pro-amnesty candidate, did a joint fundraiser with my opponent. The pictures are out there. She's in the joint fundraiser. He was so proud of his partnership with my opponent that he had a handshake with her, featured front page on his website. He was running against a conservative Republican. That's the point we make. We don't know, you know my track record, what I've bled for. 20-year, 100% pro-life voting record. Not an easy thing to do when you're in a pro-choice legislative district. I had to work hard to maintain a conservative majority for a pro-life legislature. Worked really hard, unbelievably hard, to be able to win in that legislative district. You know this about me. You know about my track record on charter schools. I had to bleed to make sure that we could continuously expand, be #1 in the nation in school choice. Homeschooling. They brag about our homeschool laws in Arizona. The best homeschool laws in the nation. If you're a homeschool parent in Arizona, you can't be harassed by government. Plain and simple. Our homeschool parents love my laws that I created. You know, for 20 years, the fight that I've been fighting. And you know the depth that I take in doing research and get ready for fights. I win fight after fight after fight. I'm going to win this Common Core fight. I've already blocked Common Core science standards because of the climate change issues. I've already blocked Common Core literature because of the pornography involved. I've already blocked Common Core history by bringing out our own initiative, Excellence in Civic Engagement. We are now going to deal with the English language arts and the math standards. And we are going to deal with them in a way that moves Arizona to the best set of standards in the nation by grinding it out and bringing in the very best experts. I've spent hours on the phone talking to Zev Werman, talking to Sandra Stotsky, talking to Terrence Moore from Hillsdale. I've read his book twice. We're ready for this fight. It's going to be a successful fight.
Mr. Huppenthal, this question's for you. Why are charter schools in Arizona profitable while public schools are constantly in need of more money?
Well, that's a softie. The charter schools have the ability to be focused and to be well organized. Not all of our charter schools are profitable. We have failure. We allow failure in the charter school system. We don't allow failure in the district school system. We're perpetually bailing out school districts across the state. Let's take it for example, right down in Arizona, or down in Tucson. Tucson Unified School District, sitting there, right next to Vail. They're spending $60,000 more per classroom. $60,000 more per classroom. If there was ever a living example of a school district where money doesn't count, a C district right next to our best district in the state, and we are peeling them alive, skinning them alive. We're peeling out thousands of students out of that school district. They are shrinking because of school choice. And the school choice, the charter schools down there They are schools like Burke Basic School here, like Legacy Academy, like Benjamin Franklin, who treasure the Constitution, who treasure the Declaration of Independence, who teach a robust history. This is my belief. I've fashioned a system over the last 20 years as the architect of our education system that is completely decentralized. Our local school boards, our local school charter schools are in complete control of their curriculum, their textbook selection. So all this stuff out there, and what we're finding is parents crave this. They want to have pride in their country. They want their students to be proud of where they live. This is the environment that I've created with my skill set. I'm asking for you to re-elect me, to have confidence in my ability to win these battles. Thank you.
Ms. Douglas, same question.
Okay, and if I recall, the question is, why are charter schools
In Arizona profitable while public schools are constantly in need of more money?
One of the things we have to do, and I discussed very often with our superintendent when I was on the school board, and we heard this frequently from your traditional district public schools, that they didn't think the competition with charter schools was fair. Well, what we need to do, in my opinion, is we need to take the reins off the traditional public schools and not tighten the reins on the charter schools. Now, unfortunately, with Common Core, which is what is in our state, it has not been removed. There's not been any battle fought over it. Everybody has been complacently going along until the Common Core moms found out about it. Even though we're going to find out, I believe, that our charter schools are not going to be able to keep up with the incessant demands of spending that are going to be mandated by this endless program. When I was on the Peoria School Board, when I was first elected to it, there's a report called the Auditor General's Report. It comes out every year for every single school district, and it gives you information about teacher salaries and the way the money is spent within the district. When I came on our school board, our dollars to the classroom were dropping, and that we didn't have as much of a dollar going into the classroom. Over time, we were able to turn that around, doing things like, we had an incredible number of, I can't think, there were teachers assigned out of the classroom. We had a name for them, and it escapes me right this minute. But we had so many teachers who spent their day having nothing to do with children. The board said, that's crazy. Let's get those teachers back in the classroom in front of kids where teachers belong. That's a way to get money back in the classroom. Another thing we did was we found an employee benefit program that did nothing to change the quality and level of benefits that our employees received, but saved the taxpayers about $2 million a year. You need to have a school board that's looking to do things like that. You need to have school boards that want to utilize their money appropriately and not just keep asking for more.
The one thing I love is numbers, because numbers to me tell stories about people. And guess what? We went out and we looked up the records on my opponent's school district. And we know those numbers exactly. Over the time period that she was on that school board, the percentage of dollars that went into the classroom dropped by 9%. And those are absolute numbers that are searchable. You can go out there and you can find those numbers. So that's the case there. The story you just heard is a false story. That in fact the percentage of spending in the classroom didn't go up. We know because we do research on these kind of things and we keep track of these things. So these are the issues. Knowing your data exactly, getting ready for battle, being confident in what you're doing. We do this all the time. We fight battles in every arena. Let me give you an example. On the waiver fight with the federal government, I literally reached inside the federal regulatory agency, went inside what they call Institute of Education Sciences, because I knew the research that these people had done. And I had them go down the hallway and beat up the regulatory people so that we could back them off. Literally, because I knew the research studies they had done did not back up the pressures that they were trying to put on us as a state. This is what you have to know. This is the kind of knowledge you have to be a sophisticated negotiator against the federal government. Thank you.
Ms. Douglas, a question from the audience. We have not had local control in over 50 years because teachers' unions have picked who was elected to the school board. What will you do to restore parental control to school boards and not teachers' unions?
Ladies and gentlemen, that's in your hands. That is not something that I believe gets decreed from Jefferson Avenue. You have, every 2 years, we have school board elections. You need to know who those candidates are. You need to find out who's running, who's backing them, who's giving them money, and then you need to get out and campaign for your candidates. When we were on the Peoria School Board, when I was on the Peoria School Board, they tried to have the union mandate meet and confer. That's a pretty name for collective bargaining that they now use to try to fool us. We change names a lot in education, or we give them pretty names. But that's a local issue, and you need to know your people. You need to vet them, you need to find out what their background is, and you need to find out who's funding their campaigns. And you surely, in your communities, you have enough people that if you make that effort, you can get the people you want elected to your school board. And that's one of the most important duties, I believe, you have for your children.
When I was in the state senate, I took the war directly to the teachers union. I went over there, I said, look, it takes 180 days. 180 days to dismiss a non-performing teacher. You need to have some pride in yourself and shorten this down. This is intolerable that we allow very poor performing teachers to stay on. You probably heard about the lawsuits that are going on in California right now on this issue. I put through in the legislature in 1996 a law that shortened that 180 days down to 90 days. This is a huge victory. In California, they went the opposite way. They went to 5 years. 5 years. They had what they call rubber rooms. Teachers would show up in the rubber room and read library books, play cards, sleep, and collect a paycheck while school districts were trying to dismiss them. I did the exact opposite. And I didn't reissue a press release. I kept right on working, folks. These are the kind of accomplishments that I've been able to tick up over and over again. Think about that. While California and New York were going out to years to get rid of a non-performing teacher, I shrunk that down to 90 days, and that created the momentum. We were later able to get it down to 60 days, which I also supported. That's all it takes in Arizona to dismiss a non-performing teacher is 60 days. These are the kind of accomplishments that I've racked up over the last 20 years, one after another. Never a press release. And I'm counting on you all to think deeply about what you're hearing tonight. I'm a workhorse. I don't go out and give fancy speeches. I can't use that soaring rhetoric to get people all charged up. I just perform for you. Creating school choices, decentralizing power, creating local control of curriculum. That's what I do, and I'm extremely effective at it. Thank you.
Mr. Huppenthal, this question is for you. If the parents in Tucson were to support ethnic studies and bilingual education, why, as a conservative, would you not support local autonomy and allow said programs? And as you address that, if you talk a little bit about English-only education.
I'm the ultimate local control elected official, but there are limits even for me. You have a responsibility not to trash the minds of young children. There are bounds. So it's called the white lines. Staying between the white lines. And TUSD went way outside of those white lines. They were teaching students to hate America. They were teaching a history which was totally opposite of the facts. Describing Benjamin Franklin as a racist. Anybody who knows his history knows that he belongs in the pantheon of civil rights heroes. Literally right in front of him. He freed his own slaves. He gave them responsibilities and power in his position out of his own pocket. As a businessman, he paid for the very first schools for African Americans in this country. What they were teaching those kids about our founding fathers was so hateful, it is way outside the bounds. There's no definition of local control in which I would ever allow that kind of thing. I was so glad to take that case to them. Their curriculum was so messed up. It was so disgusting what was going on there. It was clearly beyond the bounds of anything that is tolerable from a local control standpoint. We wanted to have this active debate. I defeated them in state court. I defeated them in federal court. And we're continuing. This battle will never end. These forces are there continuously. And we are still defeating them. Thank you.
See, no matter what the circumstances are, there's always something you can find to agree on. I am a huge proponent of local control. I think you understand that. But when our schools are teaching our children to hate America or to see her as an adversary, when this is a country that has spread more freedom, more prosperity, has had more blessings than any other nation because we were founded under God, that's something that we have to make sure that is conveyed to our children. And that wasn't happening down in Tucson. But it's also not happening in our classrooms. The AP, David Coleman, who's the architect of Common Core and has brought that debacle on us, is now over at the College Board and has rewritten the AP program, the Advanced Placement Program, in American history. And once again, we're going to continue teaching our children that their founding fathers were not the great men that we all know them to be, and that we understood, that we were taught when we were in school. This has to stop, and a part of this comes from our colleges of education, because what happens is teachers are taught all too often to teach, and I don't mean to impugn teachers because we have many wonderful ones who love their subject matter. But what's going on at our universities is that they are not teaching our prospective teachers the content knowledge they need to convey these thoughts, these beliefs, and the foundation that our children need to be not only knowledgeable, but free governing Americans. You've seen it, Howard Zinn's book was referenced. That's an absolutely awful history book. We can't allow this to continue. When my daughter was in school, and she was in high school, I didn't look for the education math teacher. I looked for the math major, the mathematician who wanted to be in the classroom. We need historians who want to be in the classroom. Our colleges of education should be the hardest schools to get in a university, not the easiest, and that's where a lot of the problem lays also.
Ms. Douglas, this question is for you as well. Two-part question from the audience here. Since students have scored higher using Common Core standards, and since our old Arizona standards were rated lower by the Fordham Institute specifically, what standards would you have students use? And as you address that, would you also talk about how you'll deal with teachers that seem to be rather enthused by the Common Core standards?
Well, the problem with the Common Core standards is it's one size fits all, and it has to be everywhere in every school, and it's controlled by the federal government. So it has to be removed, in my opinion, because it's unconstitutional. That doesn't mean we can't have equally high standards. That's kind of a misnomer with the Fordham Foundation. If I remember correctly, our English language, our arts, and our math standards were rated a B by the Fordham Foundation, and they were recognized by Dr. Sandra Stotsky, one of the preeminent standards experts in America, as among the best in the nation. And Common Core was rated, I believe, a B+, I can't remember which one, and an A-. So a very minimal difference, and of course the Fordham Foundation was given $1.6 million to come up with that rating on the Common Core standards by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but that, I'm sure that's just a fluke. Anyway, our standards, we could go back to our own standards. Those of you who were here Saturday night heard from Dr. Stotsky. She has standards in place that are free and will be totally under the control of a local state who chooses to use them, or a local district that chooses to use them. So why are we going to invest, or actually have taken from us, hundreds of millions of dollars in new funding for education to get a change that's virtually non-existent? We just heard yesterday our letter grades were released by the State Department of Education under the Ames test and Common Core standards, which haven't been in place long enough. Supposedly education is increasing in Arizona. We have more schools that are going up and fewer schools on the lower end, but yet we've allowed them to totally rip apart our education system and put it under the control of people way too far away in Washington, D.C. That makes no sense to me. We can do that here in Arizona. We had the best education system. America had the best education system in the world until we allowed progressives to get in there and rip it apart. And this is just another step undermining it.
Mr. Huppenthal.
The situation that we're faced with is complicated. It's not as simple as being able to go in and say, I'm going to get rid of these standards on the first day of office by signing something. No more than you could say, I'm going to get rid of Alma School Road on the first day by, what would you do, erase it off the map? It is a complex situation. Some of the standards that have been put in place by the state board appear to be excellent standards, standards that conservatives have fought for 20 years. Those are things that we're going to probably want to keep. We're going to want to keep phonics and phonemic awareness, letter identification, reading by kindergarten. That's solid. Knowing your multiplication facts by 3rd grade. Knowing double-digit multiplication and long division by 5th grade. Starting in on your algebra and getting your basic algebra stuff in place by the 6th grade. Being able to construct a sentence, a paragraph, and a research paper. We as conservatives have fought for this for 20 years. There's a number of victories in here. But we want to go through there with our best education leaders helping to guide us in a series of hearings. Now, the state board had 8 consecutive hearings. But guess what? People don't come to hearings until they feel the impact on themselves. Now is the time for hearings. The time is right for us to start this process and grind through this and make sure that you are all comfortable with our math and English language arts standards. Those standards are no way, shape, or form perfect. Have our academic results gone up under them? Absolutely they did. But guess what? My reading of the research is that standards are a relatively small part of the whole equation. I read a lot of research. And I want to have standards that you all are comfortable with, standards that you are proud of, standards that reflect the very best traditions in American education. And we're going to get there. And we're going to get there with guidance from our great education experts. We're going to keep those hearings going. The plan is 8 consecutive ones to address every single comment, to think about every single comment. This is what I do to make things come out in a better place. Not some slipshod, half-dash process like they used in Indiana that is a mess. They will be a decade recovering from that disaster. When we're done with our consecutive hearings, we're going to come out this with a consensus in Arizona. This is a great set of standards we can move forward with, and we will have completely banished Common Core Science, Common Core History, Common Core Literature. These will be Arizona standards. That stuff will be gone. Thank you.
This is going to be the last question here, and then we're going to move into closing statements. Mr. Huppenthal, there's at least 5 questions here that revolve around where you stand on the pro-life issue, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it, because apparently there are some people that are concerned about where you stand. Are you pro-life, and how does that square with allowing Common Core Planned Parenthood sex education in the classrooms?
I have a 20-year, 100% pro-life voting record, pro-family voting record in the state legislature. When defining marriage as one man and one woman came out of the legislature, it came out because I was there that night to fight the battle on the floor of the Senate. The microphone was handed to me. Order completely broke down in the Senate. I had to conduct 45 consecutive minutes of motions. It was my skills, the skills that I'm talking about here tonight, that enabled that to get out to the ballot and be approved. 100% pro-life voting record, 100% pro-family voting record. As to whether there are standards in place that do the things that were just described, I have not seen any standard like that in the college and career ready math or English language arts standards. I haven't seen anything like that whatsoever. I would never allow a standard like that to go into place in Arizona. Thank you.
Ms. Douglas.
I'm absolutely pro-life. When I started on the board a few years in, I had the honor of being invited by Arizona Right to Life to serve on an education panel and speak to them about how these issues integrate into education. There absolutely are sex ed standards that have been written. They're called, and the total name escapes me, National Sexual, it's got really something standards, I forget. But they were written with the help of Planned Parenthood. And don't doubt for a minute that they won't be in our classrooms. We already know from Tempe Union High School District that they are making inroads in bringing those in to hurt our children, to hurt their moral values. You know, I told you that many years ago we moved here from New Jersey to raise and educate our daughter. Never looked back, never regretted that decision. But one of the reasons we made that decision, because people say, how could you do that? They spend so much money on education in New Jersey. Even 20 years ago, 26 years ago, they spent a lot of money on education in New Jersey. And why would you come to Arizona? Well, first of all, I'm here to say my daughter got an excellent education in Arizona, and we are very glad we came here. But one of the reasons we left, if I'm not mistaken, New Jersey was the first state to adopt Heather Has Two Mommies for use in the classroom. You know what? If a school system harms your child's academic or delays your child's academic achievement, you can always get a tutor, you can tutor them yourself. There are zillions of ways to bring your child up to speed academically. But when the people in the school district want to harm their moral values and work against what you're working for in the home to raise your child, that cannot be abided and that must be stopped. And we cannot allow that to continue in our schools.
Not only
you'll have the last word, Ms. Douglas.
Not only did I have a 20-year, 100% pro-life voting record, but twice my election victory in very difficult circumstances restored a pro-life majority to the state Senate. In 1992, when I got elected, they had a pro-abortion majority. My election made it a pro-life majority. In 2006, when Slade Mead brought a pro-abortion majority to the legislature, I was picked. I got the call to take him out. An incredibly difficult election. Huge personal sacrifice. Twice, I restored a pro-life, pro-family majority to the state Senate. And we were able to make huge gains by having that pro-life, pro-family majority. Thank you.
Ms. Douglas, an opportunity for rebuttal?
Yeah, I thought we were done doing the rebuttals back and forth, but I don't.
Well, this is just too much fun.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm having fun. And obviously that's an issue we agree on. Protecting the sanctity of life is what we are called to do as human beings, and we must do that. But we must make sure that our children are protected from these types of things like Planned Parenthood, sex education, that just want to break down the moral fiber, break down the family. That can't be happening from within the system that we entrust our children to.
Thank you both. Let's move right to closing statements, and we'll begin with Mr. Huppenthal.
I'm a known product at the state level. You've experienced me over and over again for 20 years. The deciding vote to bring charter schools to Arizona. Developing a 15-year charter law instead of a 10-year charter law. Allowing them to go in for their charter renewals in 10 years instead of having to wait till the end. Allowing charter schools to get an automatic new school without having to go through the whole bureaucratic process. It was called replication. That was my design. Over and over again, I was able to create environments that created the best possible school choice environment for Arizona. And it wasn't just among our charter schools. Our district schools, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 150,000 to 200,000 students that are making a school choice in a district school system. It's an amazing environment for a parent who's a lower middle class, poverty parent, who was not trapped the way they're trapped in other states. It's incredible. And the same thing with homeschooling. To be able to bring through laws that the Homeschool Association calls the best homeschool laws in the nation. Over and over again, I delivered. And it wasn't just in the area of education, it was all over the place. I was the 16th in deciding vote to bring concealed carry gun rights to Arizona. I was the deciding vote to get Senate Bill 1070 passed, employer verification passed. These elements, which enabled Arizona to be on an incredible conservative roll relative to other states, I was key in every one of those battles. And now we have another battle, a very complex battle, one that could damage our education system. And you know, there was a senator here, had a lot of battles with him, Rich Crandall. He said Huppenthal has to study something for 5 years before he can make a decision. Well, I don't need to study things for 5 years, but I need to study it long enough so I can have a profound knowledge that I'm going to take Arizona to a better place. And we have an incredibly complex challenge here. And I've done my studying. I've done my due diligence. I'm now ready to act. I'm asking for your confidence. I'm asking for your knowledge that how I've delivered for you over and over again in the past. I'm asking you to compare my track record of win after win after win after win with anybody else in the field and what their track record has been in producing these kind of victories. I'm asking for your support. I'm asking for your vote. And thank you for your past support. Whatever happens, it's going to be a great journey. And we trust in God as always. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we know how to educate our children. We were the best in the world at it for 200 years or more. We brought, as I said before, more freedom, more prosperity, saved more lives around the world than any other country ever. We're now being sold a bill of goods. With all due respect to my opponent, it's only a battle he wants to fight now that his political career is being threatened. We've not heard for 3.5 years one word opposing Common Core. We've heard plenty. We've heard that Common Core it's a grassroots effort. We know it's not. It's internationally benchmarked. No, it's not. There's no proof of it. We're told it's higher standards. Absolutely, it is not. What we do know is it's a federal mandate. What we also know is the school choice that we heard spoken about just a moment ago will be destroyed under the Common Core standards. Charter schools have to do exactly the same thing as traditional district schools now, and if private schools want their children to go to college, they will be forced into Common Core, as will the homeschoolers. But the thing I find most offensive about Common Core is this data collection that they will do on our children. And you know, I don't stand up and I don't make promises as a candidate that I can't keep. I don't say I'm going to promise to raise the graduation rate 10 points or the reading rate this point, because there's a lot of issues involved in that. But when my opponent took office, he was sent to communist China to bring back ideas for here in Arizona on how they educate our children. Ladies and gentlemen, I will make you one promise. When I'm your superintendent of public instruction, I will not go to a communist country to see how they educate their children, because I don't care. We are America, we are the land of the free and the home of the great, and that's the heritage. That is what our children deserve to know and love about this country, and that's what I do promise to fight for you and for your children. Thank you. God bless you all. Pray for our nation, please.
Let's give both John Huppenthal and Diane Douglas a hand. Great job. We hope that you both will stick around. I know we've got a lot of folks here that would like to mingle, talk with you if possible, so we hope that you'll hang around in the foyer. Thank you both so much for participating. Thank you. Folks, before you go...
We'll introduce new evidence in the closing statement.
Hold on, John. John, if I'm going to give you 60 seconds...
Then she gets 60 seconds too.
That's fair enough.
To introduce new evidence in the closing seconds here, we have an obligation to be as knowledgeable as we can when we guide systems. I did have an opportunity to go over to China, and I visited schools there. I was studying this intently. We absolutely need to be knowledgeable at all levels. And I went back and forth before I took that trip. I've turned down 17 Fiesta Bowls, 2 Super Bowls, a World Series. My track record of accepting lobbyist meals is 0 per year. But I went over there because I wanted to become more profoundly knowledgeable about what our potential competitors might be doing. That's our obligation, is to become knowledgeable, not to seclude ourselves off in the world. My track record as a conservative is unparalleled in the history of Arizona. I'm proud of that record, and it's undiminished by the fact that I would go out and become more knowledgeable about a major competitor of ours who's growing at 11% a year. Thank you.
I will just say to conclude that I think taking a trip to Communist China, sponsored by one of the publishing companies that stands to make a fortune off of Common Core, speaks for itself. With that, I'll say good night. God bless you all.
I want to leave you with just some final thoughts. Thank you both again. We want to invite you to visit freedomfires.com. That's freedomfires.com to see some of the things that we're doing. I just want to share with you before you do head out just one experience that I had. Hopefully that will provide some additional motivation. I was sitting down with my daughter last night. I have 6 children, and my youngest is 5. 5 boys, and we finally got our girl. And I was sitting at the dinner table with her. She was sitting right next to me, and she looked up at me. And it was just great. She says, "Dad, so how's the fight for freedom going?" It was great. I said, "Well, it's going just fine." And she says, "Well, how are those people doing that are supposed to be helping you out?" I said, "It's a team effort. We're making this happen together." So I want to thank you for coming out here every week, making this happen together. Invite your friends and family next week. Christine Jones will be here among others. We got a great program scheduled for next week. Good night, folks. We'll see you.